All right, welcome in. My name is Kesley Anderson, and tonight we're going to talk about how to sew your first apron project. I've picked out the Simplicity pattern here. This is a great pattern, and we'll kind of go through how to pick out your pattern, what items you need from the pattern, how to kind of read the envelope. We do have a great video on the Michael's YouTube channel that goes into more detail on how to read the envelopes for your patterns, and then we'll go and discuss cutting the pattern and transition into sewing. So it'll be a fast-paced class, but do not hesitate to drop your questions in the Q&A, and we can get those answered for you. Now, I did the apron, and I thought I was being clever to do the extra large youth apron to use as an example because it was a little bit smaller than the adult sizes, but it actually fits me. So this is the apron style we're going to be working with tonight. On your pattern, this is actually apron C. There's within the pattern itself, you'll see that there are 4 different options of the apron. You have they jump around A, B, C, and D. And what's great about this pattern is it goes from like a kid size, extra small to extra large, and then adult sizes and up. So you can have an apron in your envelope for anybody you want to make an apron for. I chose apron C to work with tonight because you will work with a casing on the seam. We'll add some nice little pockets and we'll make our own strap on the apron. So let me take that off because I know I'm going to need to show you how that was put together as we go along. Now, when you get when you select your pattern to work with and you select which design you're going to have on the back, you can come through and figure out from the back of your pattern what your fabrics need to be. So for this one, it recommends a cotton or a cotton blend. You can really use a lot of different styles of material. As you're getting started though, a cotton is really a great, like, no-brainer. You can't go wrong with that. I did pull out this decor fabric in the Michael's fabric section. It's like in the home decor section. It's a duck cloth weight fabric and it has a pattern to it. So it's a little bit heavier than, say, a pattern in the calico section. So on the back, you'll select which apron you're going to make. So today we're going to make apron C, and it has all of the sizes on the back of the apron as well. I'm sorry, on the back of your packaging as well. So if you were to make the children's extra large, which is the size I made, and you follow down, it'll tell you you need 1 3/8 inch of a yard. So when you go to your store and you pick out your fabric, you'll ask them to cut this 1 3/8 inch of a yard. If you need any additional notions like buttons or anything, zippers, it would be up here in the notions section of your pattern. This apron did not require any notions, so all I needed to have was my fabric, my pattern, and some thread, and I was ready to go home and start sewing. So let's talk about when you get home and you're ready to open this up and take a look inside. Did anybody have any questions, Rich, about reading the pattern itself?
Nope, no questions yet.
Okay. So when you get home and you open up your package, you will find that you have 2 different things inside your package. You'll have the instructions, which are on this manila paper, and then you'll have your actual pattern. Now, this will pull out and it gets really large when you open it up. And I say really large, like the material, the paper itself is really quite big. So how do you know which pieces you need to cut out? What you'll do is when you look at your instructions, it will actually tell you which pieces you need. So on this one, it says use pattern piece 7 through 12 for view C. So each of the pattern pieces has a number on that pattern piece. So I need to go through all the pages and find 7 through 12 in the pieces. Now, each one also has a kid size and an adult size. That's not always the case in a pattern. A lot of times it'll just be for adults or just be kids. So that's not always the case, but in this one it is. So you open up your paper here, your tissue paper. And like I said, it's really big, but we're gonna go ahead and give this an open. And on this, I want to pull out piece number 11, and I'm pulling that out specifically. Let's see if we can get this. You know, it's right in the middle, right? So I'm just going to kind of work my way here to piece number 11. Sorry, I want you guys to get the full experience of what it's like when you have your pattern. Now grab your scissors. Normally you could we'll just cut through to that piece. If you like to, you can kind of separate all the pieces, but I'm just going to get us to the one we need right here. And the reason I want to choose this one is because I want to show you how to cut the pattern piece so it's the size that you need. Because each pattern piece has size small to extra large on it. So we're going to get this one out. And this is the kids piece. I have all the other pieces are cut out and ready to go. So I just wanted to show you once you get one, and then you'll fold this back up following the fold lines. I'm just going to step this off to the side for today. Okay. Rich, do you want to go ahead and go to the overhead camera? All right, great. So as you can see, I have my piece here. Now, if your piece is super wrinkly and it makes it a little hard for you to see, you can go ahead and grab your iron and just press, give it a little press. So it's a little bit smoother for you to see. Okay. Now, what I want to show you on your pattern piece, this over here, that actually is kind of helpful. What I want to show you is your pattern piece gives you a lot of information. So it indicates the grain of the where you need to place your pattern piece on the grain. It will tell you your seam allowance. So this one has a 5/8 inch seam allowance allowed. So it's already taken into account. It will tell you how much you need to cut of this particular piece. So for this one, we need to cut 2 from fabric, and it'll have placements for you. So these little circles indicate where it's going to be placed on the garment. And if you see notches like this, that indicates where you need to match things together. So if you have this piece and your apron piece, this is the front of your apron here, and this is your armhole piece, you'll notice that this notch and this notch will match up. So when we put this on together, you're going to match up your notches and match up and dots and markations like that. So we'll transfer that, those marks onto our material. Now, when you are cutting this out, you can either, if you want to keep all the sizes, you can trace this onto a larger piece of paper. Or if you know, okay, I know I'm just going to make an extra large kid size, and that's the only size you're going to make, you're going to go ahead and cut following the lines for the size that you choose. So if you're doing the small, you would follow this line right here, your medium, your large, and your extra large. And you'd follow that line all the way around your garment, all the way around your pattern piece, and cut your pattern pieces to that size. So we do cut into the pattern piece here, and we're going to cut off those other little bits there. We don't need that. You can just disregard that. The notches, you don't need to do anything with the notches until we get to the fabric itself. And then we'll notch that on when we cut it out. Okay, so that's what you're going to do. You'll just trace around it and cut all the way to the end of your material. I mean, of your pattern. I keep saying material. You'll do that till the end of your pattern. Okie doke. So we'll just kind of pull that all off here. And you'll do that for all the patterns, number 7 through 12 for this particular apron. And then once you have everything all cut out, you're ready to lay out your fabric and put your pattern on your fabric. You're going to want to keep your instructions handy because we'll refer to these as we move along through our project here. So I'm going to hold those out and we'll start laying out our material. Now I'm going to try and go up a little bit higher with my camera so you guys can see a little bit more of the space. And again, I apologize, I'm not in my usual workspace. So I have all of my pieces cut out, all my pattern pieces, 7 through 12, and I have my material. So for your material, what you'll do, and I actually have everything cut out. So I'm not going to have to cut out everything, but I want to show you because there are pieces that are a little bit intricate for cutting. So you'll take your fabric. Now you can pre-wash your fabric if you'd like, or you can just keep it, right out of the bag. This is not going to shrink, but it does have a sizing on it. So sometimes you may want to wash it to remove any sizing. You can also see that my particular pattern here is one way. So the words on this fabric only goes in one direction. So I'm going to make sure I place my pieces on my fabric so that they'll follow that direction. So to get started, I'm going to take the front part of my pattern here. Let me pull these over. You want to lose a little piece? Okay. So I would take the front part of my pattern. Now, this is a symmetrical piece. The front of your material is symmetrical. So what that means is it's the same left to right. So I did a fold down the center. And when you have a pattern that you've either created a fold down the center or it says to place on the fold. So like this pocket here, it says center front on fold. And it's a little hard to see. But so you'll see that your patterns will tell you to place on the fold. So what you do is you find the fold of your fabric, which is right here on this edge. This is where my fabric is folded in half. And I would place my garment, my pattern, right on that fold. And then I'm cutting through 2 layers at once. So I'm cutting through both layers at once. I usually like to turn my fabric so the wrong side is facing out, and I can take a disappearing ink pen and just trace out my pattern like that, and then just trim on those lines. That way I don't have to do so much pinning as I'm working along. So that's one little trick there. Now we talked about the notches. When you get to notches in cutting, you'll want to mark those notches. I mark them outward. So it's a little hard to see there, but I'll draw my triangle out, coming out of my garment. And then where you have these marcation holes, here, let's define our extra larges. You want to go ahead and mark those placements. So you can put a pin where that's going to go, or you can like dig a little hole with your pin. Excuse me.
Kesley, we do have one question while you're talking about the patterns. Michelle's wondering, how do you know which patterns to cut out? She has in parentheses 7 to 12.
So on my instruction sheet, it tells me which pieces I need. That's a great question, by the way. On your instruction sheet, it will tell you which pieces you need. Either this has it written out right here for me, or you can look and see how the material is placed on the fabric to get the pieces that you need. So it says 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. So that's another way you can look at the layout, or it will tell you which pieces you need. It also lists it out right here and says like piece number 12 is the tie for view C. So you have it in a couple different places to indicate which pieces you need. And then the pieces are, nice and huge. So I'm going to show you on this piece here, because this one's a little bit unique. Our pocket, again, center fold, so that automatically go right on the grain line right there. This piece is our casing. This will be the casing for your sleeve. So it has this arrow right here that tells me this is the grain line. Now the grain of your fabric is either your selvage edge and your fold. The grain, that's how the grain of your fabric goes. So when a pattern piece says grain of fabric, you want to line that line parallel to the fold or the selvage edge, depending on what you have to work with. So for this one, I want this to be parallel to this line. Now you can take a ruler and measure, and make sure that it's lined up. You want it to be equal distance from the start and the end of your arrow there on the line. So you can just use a ruler to line that up and place that how you'd like it to go. Now, if I'm cutting with a pattern, so if I'm cutting and keeping my pattern on my material, I do use pins, and I'll just pin my pattern piece right on to my garment, my fabric, just like this. I have to cut 2 of these. So I have my material, it's folded over, and you can really work from the selvage edge or the folded edge, whatever works more comfortable for you. If I were doing this not on camera, I would do this edge so I didn't waste any material. Then you're just going to cut along those lines.
Kesley, Amer's wondering, why is it important to line up with the grain?
I'm sorry, can you say that one more time?
Why is it important to line up with the grain?
So the grain of your fabric is how your fabric is woven. A piece like this, it's going to go on a curve. So your fabric by nature will have more stretch on the angle than it does if you're going with the grain line. So see how that, take your fabric and the grain, there's really no stretch. But if I go on the angle, I get a lot of stretch in my material. So that's why you want to follow the grain lines. If it indicates that it's on a grain line, you want to follow that so that you don't, so that your pattern piece doesn't stretch more than it should. So this is already going to be a stretch because it's on a curve. We don't want it to be more stretchy. Also, following the grain helps you. Having that grain line does help so that your pattern piece doesn't end up, really crooked. So if I just popped my pattern piece right in the middle of my material without placing it on a fold or measuring it along the grain line, it would get crooked and it wouldn't be so pretty. So right here we have that notch, and I'm just going to go to that notch and we're going to cut a triangle. Sometimes you'll see a double notch and sometimes you'll see a single notch. So I just am going to cut, let me switch my fabric here. I'm going to cut a notch, a single notch. Now, why would you see a double notch sometimes and a single notch sometimes? If your piece of pattern needs to have 2 notches, you'll have a single notch and a double notch. If you just need to have 1 piece to line up, it would only have a single notch. So there's my notch right there. And then I have some markings here for lining up on the sleeve. So when you have something like this, if you don't want to mark it with invisible ink, you'd rather mark it with your pins. Take your pin and push it through the hole on one side, match up the pin on the other side, pushing it through the hole at the same point. So you'll do that on both sides. Now I happen to sew for I sew for pleasure. So a lot of the things I make, I sew for myself, I sew for fun. Sewing is relaxing for me. So I don't really get too hung up when I sew. I do, make a note of where things should match up, but I've sewn long enough that for me, if it doesn't match up perfectly, I can kind of finagle it and get it to line up well enough. So I guess what I'm saying is, if you are off a little bit on your mark, or something happens and you lose your pin, don't stress out about it. It'll all work out in the end. So then when you peel your pieces apart, you'll have your pin there marking where that notch is, and you'll know how to line that up when you get to the sleeve of your garment. Okay.
Kesley, Michelle is wondering, can you repeat why you pin the holes again, please?
Yes, absolutely. So when you have your pattern pieces, you'll be lining up. Actually, let me just show you on the finished one. That might make more sense, because sometimes it does make sense when you see it done. So this piece here that I just cut out, this is the casing on the apron. So that's this piece right here. This casing piece right here. So when you put that onto the side armhole, you have to have a way to line up where your casing is going to match your front of your material. So in my pattern here, if this were my material, I have a hole here and a hole here that I would then need to take my cut piece and line up my notches and where the holes are. And that's how you line up when you're matching pieces together. You use the notches and the holes to get your placement. So on this apron, for example, we have some pockets that you can add to your apron. We're going to just do one pocket tonight in this class, but if you wanted to, there's a small pocket on the top, and then another small pocket here, and a large one. To know where to place those pockets, you need to have the holes or the markings in your fabric to know where that pocket's going to sit. Now, again, if you missed marking those and you didn't know where to put them, I'm going to show you a cheat on how we can do that. Okay, are there any more questions about cutting out the pattern? Because I have all my pieces cut out, and we can start kind of doing some assembly on those, unless we have more questions, which happy to answer those. We've got a little bit of ironing to do. All right. So I did, just in preparation for the class, I thought it would be more time prudent if I had everything cut out for you all. So I've gone ahead and cut out my pieces. Now, if I open up my pattern information, it gives me the step-by-step instructions on what I need to do when. So let's find apron C, and we'll see which our steps are. So the first steps we're going to do have to do with the pocket. So you have one small pocket at the top center of your apron. If you want to put that on there, that's this pocket here. So you would put that pocket on first, and then you would attach the second pocket, which this is a pocket in a pocket. So you can put extra things and larger items in here. So you have two pockets. But again, for the interest of the class, we're just going to add the large pocket along the base of our apron, and then we'll move on from there. So we're going to I'm just going to jump us over these steps, placing the smaller pockets, and we'll do the larger pocket. To prepare your piece of fabric for your pocket placement. It comes out really long because this one was cut on the fold and then it opens up to be this long. Now, as you can see, you can look at your pictures here and you'll see this pocket goes all the way across the apron. And you sew two little, we'll sew two seams right down the center of our pocket. So it'll split it into thirds. But first we're going to give ourselves a nice sharp edge on the top and a hem on the bottom. So you want to grab your iron and your heating pad. I'm using my little heating pad here, and we're going to turn down our seam allowance on our top pocket. Now, if you look at your pattern piece for your pocket, it will tell you how much to turn down. So you can see, oops, this isn't the right piece. Aha, sorry about that. I had the wrong piece. We can see how much we need to turn down on the top and the bottom. So I've already turned down and ironed my top down. So it just comes down 1 inch and you just fold it down and give it a good press. And then your bottom comes up 3/8 of an inch. And you'll just fold that and press along both sides. Now for the top, you can go ahead and do a stitch along this top line, which we'll do that before applying it to the apron. So we'll have that, and that's all ready to go. Now, when we get to, since we have the iron out, when you get to the arm casings, remember our little notches here? When we will put these on and they'll kind of turn inside out. So what we're going to do is we'll do the ironing on this part too, and we can press this at the same time. On your curve, you have 5/8 of an inch to, 3/8 of an inch on the outer edge of each piece. So what I like to do is I use this little ruler, and it's a slide ruler. So you just get to the 3/8 inch mark. And I usually will start not on the end and work my way in, but I'll start kind of in the middle and work my way in. So you just fold it back to about 3/8 of an inch and hold it there. And then you'll press that spot there and we'll work our way either side. So I'm just going to give that a little press right there. Now, what's interesting about this is it's a little bit too big. So you have a little bit of extra fabric here. And you just need to work that extra fabric down with your iron. This part will be concealed, so you won't see this under part here. So if you have a little crease or something, that's okay. So you just work this down 3/8 of an inch across the whole curve. And you're just going to keep working that around. So see that 3/8 of an inch right there, and we'll do that the whole curve. I like to, when I usually work on things on sewing, I like to do one step, like all my iron all my hems up at once, and then work my way through the steps that way. So if I have a little fold there, that's okay because I want to have a smooth curve here. That little fold there, you just kind of have to work that in to get your 3/8 of an inch fold over. So if you can stretch it out, you can always trim off a little bit there, but you kind of want to have that pressed in and give it a nice little crease. Now, I would take the time to make sure your 3/8 inch seam is equal and even across your whole piece. So you just want to make that, if it gets too big, then you won't have, if your seam here gets too far in, you won't have the room for the casing. This is going to create what it will hold your tie. So it's the outer edge, and you're just going to press it in 3/8 of an inch. One thing I liked about this pattern is it really does have a lot of the prep work done. So you're working on your flat pieces and not worrying about working so many seams on the garment itself. I thought that made it great for a beginner project. So you're going to do that 3/8 of an inch, and then we'll turn the tops down 5/8 of an inch. And this will give, again, the top of your casing will be right here. So slide down to 5/8 of an inch, and then we'll just press that down like that. And you'll press the top and the bottom. Do it on both sides. And press that down. So this inner piece here, this side that we don't have the hem on, that's going to line up to the armpit of you, or the armhole of your apron. So you'll have that all in one piece like that, and nice and pressed, still mindful of where your notch is. And we'll just press this one too. So I kind of like to do my pressing and my top stitching at the same time. And when you've been sewing for quite a long time, you'll get really comfortable with where 1/4 of an inch is, 3/8 of an inch is, and 5/8 of an inch. So you'll get to the point where you can just eyeball it, but I always can grab my ruler and make sure that I have the right measurement that I need. All right, so there we go. So now I've got my casings are all pressed and ready to go, and my pocket is pressed and ready to go. So I'm going to grab my sewing machine and we'll start doing the sewing. I think I need to keep that over there. All right, so let me pull up my sewing machine. Now I couldn't decide if I wanted to change out my colors or just stick with white. I decided to just stick with white. Okay, so I hope you guys can see enough. Does that look okay, Rich?
It sure does.
Okay. I'm just wondering if I should change that camera. All right. I tried it earlier. So with your sewing machine, what you want to do is you want to look on your faceplate to see where 3/8 of an inch is, 5/8 of an inch is, or 1/4 of an inch, whatever amount you need to stitch. And then you're just going to run your material along that line. So we did a 3/8 inch fold on this, and you want to stitch close to that 3/8 of an inch. So when I put it in my machine, I'm pretty much going to use that edge there, the pressed edge, to get my distance. So the top will be a little bit less than 5/8 of an inch. So more like 1/2 an inch in. And if your needle position allows you to press your needle down, that makes it so easy to rotate your material in the machine. So once your needle's sunk in, when your needle's sunk in like that, you can lift your presser foot and rotate your material, and then put your presser foot back down. And then we'll just keep going along about 1/4 of an inch from the edge on the casing. So this is some of the prep work you can do as you're sewing before you have to put everything together. Just tuck that last piece in there. Okay, and then we'll flip that over. Oops, I got a little far. We'll do that last piece about, again, 1/2 an inch in from the top. Oh. All right, so there's my casing. I've got my top seam is closed and my side seam is closed. And we will stitch this down again on that side. So don't worry if you didn't catch your seam for some reason, this side will be inside on the garment. So like right there, I missed catching it. I'm not really that pressed about it because that will go on the inside part of the garment. So we'll do the same thing to this one. Again, you just do about a 1/2 inch seam on the top because you want to get it close to that edge there. And then you'll rotate it and do about a 1/4 inch on the bottom. And the finished edge here, your casing will come out that finished edge. Okay, so sink your needle, rotate your material. A little far there, rotate my material. And again, I'm just gonna do that 1/4 inch along the edge. Rich, I'm just gonna try and bring my camera down, this camera, so people can see.
I was just about to ask you if there was any way for you to pull it down a bit.
Yeah, that will work.
That's perfect.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah.
So you see, I'm just working about a 1/4 inch from the folded edge on my fabric there. And you just kind of make sure it's tucked under and work it around. And then this end, we want to make sure that that gets tucked under. See, I have this little needle position. So when I get to the point I'm ready to rotate my material, my needle will sink into my material and I can lift. Right, there we go. I can lift my presser foot, rotate my material, and start stitching again. And I'm gonna, so that's all you have to do there. Okay, so we're just gonna bring that over and stitch that across. And then we're gonna push up our needle position up at the end and pull that out. We're good to go. Just like that. So now I have that is all stitched on the raw edge as well. For our pocket, we just need to do a seam stitch along this edge where we folded it over. We're just going to do a stitch along that edge too. And I'm actually going to do it in reverse so you guys can see where that's going to go. I usually would turn it over and stitch on the other direction, but so you can see where your stitch goes. It's just about less than a 1/4 inch from that raw edge there. Now you could do pinking shears along this edge if you wanted to, or you could do an over stitch if you wanted. Even do a double hem and then make your seam a little bit smaller. All right. So there we go there. Now we're ready to position that on the apron. So let me pull our apron over and we'll do that. I'll pop you back up top. You guys are getting, we're gonna go up top and then we'll pull the apron over again. I'll show you how we position that. Oops. There we go.
Trudy has a question. What's a double hem?
A double hem. Did I say double hem?
Yes, you said if you would like to do a double hem, you could do that as well.
If you'd like to do it. That's a good question. I don't know what I meant. We'd like to do a double hem.
Or maybe she meant a double stitch.
Well, you could do like a second stitch along here if you wanted to, just to give it a little extra sturdiness. I think I said an over
stitch. That's what it was.
Yes. So that is like doing a zigzag stitch on the end of your like on this raw selvage edge there. You can do a zigzag stitch just to give it a little extra so it doesn't fray or anything.
And Riva's wondering, when stitching the stitch on the top, it looks fine, but at the back of the stitch, it's all tangled up. Why does this happen and how do you correct that? Her sewing machine is a Singer heavy duty.
Oh, okay. So are you're talking about like the underneath part of your stitch is getting gunked up? Just confirm. I'm pretty sure that's what you're saying. That's a very common problem and it's a very easy fix. What's causing that is your bobbin thread. So your bobbin thread is getting caught up and it's creating like a bird's nest is what they call it. So what you can do is check to make sure that your bobbin is properly threaded, and put in your machine properly. So by properly, I mean when you put your bobbin in your machine, typically hold your bobbin and your thread like it forms the letter P, a lowercase p. And that's how you want to put it in your casing. So that's the biggest, I would say that's probably the biggest issue. So people who sew have is their bobbin threads getting that bird's nest and then being able to get that out of there. Okay, so I've got the top of my pocket. And as you can see here, there is a mark extra large right there. So that's where my pocket needs to go onto my garment. Now I have misplaced my pins on this. So I just put my pattern back on my material here, and then I can just lift up my pattern and pin my material right onto my pattern here. So you can just take your pins and we'll just pin that onto the garment. Now on your side seam here, we will be folding over 1/4 of an inch and then a full inch. So your pocket will get caught in the side seam and you won't have to it won't be hanging out. Don't worry about that. Okay, so pin along your pocket so that it doesn't move on you.
Diane's wondering, do you do the P shape for the bobbin placement in all sewing machines?
It's pretty universal. That P shape is a pretty universal position. If you can check your manual how it tells you to put it in, but that P shape is that P form is pretty universal. I have used a lot of different machines over my years, and that's a pretty consistent. I don't think I've ever had a machine that tells me to put it in a different way. Okay, so I have a little bit extra material, not extra, but I don't have as my pocket goes right to the edge here. So I'm going to use that material and push myself back a little bit on here. So I'm just going to push that. By push that back, I mean I'm going to add a little bit more of my material to the other end. So we'll just push that down here. But yeah, and even when you like having your spool of thread on your machine in the P form too, if you look at how you put your bobbin on the top of your machine, you want it to do that same piece so that your thread is coming off the back of the spool. So if this is your spool, you want your thread to be coming from the back side here, not this way. So if you were to hold your spool and hold it towards you, your thread goes around that way. And that's how you want to thread your machine as well. I wish Singer had done it in a way that it was like an S, because then that would make sense for the Singer machine, you know. But and also like if your bobbin has gotten if your bobbin's old, thread, believe it or not, does get old. We were just sewing with some thread that was my grandmother's. It just happened to be the right match for a project my daughter was working on, and it broke. And I was like, oh, I guess that's old, and I knew that. But thread does get old. Okay, so I've got this placed onto my garment, and we're just gonna stitch the bottom end and the side here. The top we're gonna leave open, and then we're gonna stitch down and make it into 3 different individual pockets. I'm okay that it doesn't line up equally on this end, since these ends are going to be turned under, we won't see those. So we'll just come on back. I'll bring my camera. Actually, I think I'll leave my camera up for this because this is pretty, just a straight shot across the garment. You just want to make sure that your pieces are held out and they don't get caught in your machine. That, I can tell you, probably we've done that before. So for this one, I'm going to go, let me see. I'm going to go about an inch from this folded edge, not an inch, a quarter of an inch from the folded edge to create my side here. So we're just going to get started, and you're just going to, as you go along, so I have pins here, and as I go along, when I'm about an inch from my needle, I'll remove that pin so it doesn't get caught in my machine or cause any problems. And I just am smoothing out my material as I go along. So it's nice and smooth. If you ever had a big piece like this and you were worried about it folding or not laying straight, you could always use spray adhesive that will wash out. So you could actually spray it on the garment and then it will wash out of your garment and it won't stay, but it holds your pieces in place, which is very helpful. So when I get to the end here, I'm just going to turn and stitch the sides down. So we're just going to turn and stitch, and the side stitch is really just a basting stitch to kind of hold it in place. It's not, since it's going to go into the garment, we don't have to worry about that in that side seam. Now, also, if you're, a lot of times, if your thread is getting caught up, I'll show you a little trick that I do to keep that from happening on my end. Okay, so then I'm just going to trim my threads here, and we're going to trim, we'll stitch this other side down again over here. And it just is like a quarter of an inch seam, so you're just running right along the edge of your fabric. And you'll see it as it comes out the back side, hopefully. Okay. Now the pattern will tell me where my seam should go to go down the garment, the pockets. So if I were to come back and take my pattern, it will show me that I should put a pocket here, which would then also be a pocket on the other side. Since you folded it, it's on the fold, so you'd have a pocket here and then a pocket there. You can put your pockets wherever you'd like to put them. You don't have to put them where the pattern tells you. So if you want to have like 8 pockets or 10 pockets, you could do that. I'll just do 3 pockets. So I'll do 1 here and 1 here. You can measure it so that you get it exactly where you want it to be, or you can kind of just have fun with it and go where you want it to go. So I'm going to bring my camera back down again. This is a shot. Okay. So here we're just going to bring our seam there that we've already stitched. I'm going to put that under my foot, my presser foot there. Let me go back just a hair. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to sink my needle so that I make sure that I am on that line that I've already stitched. So I want to kind of start right on that line. You can also start a little in front of it if you wanted to, and then stitch backwards. But with that there, then I'm just going to stitch my line straight up to the top. If you are not comfortable with this freehand doing this, you could take a ruler and your chalk pen and just draw a little chalk line like that. Okay. And then that way with a ruler, not by eye like I just did, you could do your ruler. When you get to the end of that pocket, you want to do a reverse. So I'm going to just reverse that stitch a little bit. You can even reverse it back to the seam where your stitch line is there on the hem, and then come on forward. That just reinforces the top edge of your pocket. That's all we're doing there. Okay, I'm just gonna hold you here and we'll take this out of the machine. Okay, so you would do the same step along the opposite side of your pocket and follow that through. I know we're getting a little bit tight on time, so I want to come back and work on my sides, my piece here, so we know how to do that, my casing. So we're going to go whoop and back.
Michelle is very new to sewing. She's wondering, when you say on the fold, do you mean that the material is folded?
Yes, yes. On the fold is when your material, like when I cut out my my piece here, I cut it out on the fold. Okay, so you're gonna take your casing piece and we're gonna line it up with our, oh, you know what? Sorry, guys. I've got a couple more steps to do here before I get this in there. We're gonna do our side seam here. Okay. I realize we're running short on time, so bear with me. If Rich, is it okay if we stay a little bit longer?
Should be fine.
Okay. I'll just do one side so you can see how to do one side, and then you can do the other side on your own. So we're just gonna do a 1/4 of an inch turn on our side, and then a 1 inch turn. So the 1/4 inch turn, we'll put our raw edge to the inside, and then our 1 inch turn will hold everything in place. So your raw edge won't be exposed. This is your raw edge here. And then you're just gonna turn it an inch. And again, grab your rule. When I started sewing, this tool and a seam ripper were my absolute go-tos. I had to have those. Your seam ripper is your best friend. And don't be, like warn people you live with, hey, if you see me with this tool in my hand, it means I'm taking out what I just stitched. So I might be a little grumpy because I just had to take out what I stitched. So don't, but don't be afraid to take out what you stitched if it's not working right for you. Like if you made a mistake, it's totally okay to take it out. Okay, so we've folded that back a 1/4 of an inch and then 1 inch to make our side seam. We'll do that on both sides. And then your neckline here, we're going to do a double seam on this. So we'll fold it in about, actually for this one, because it's cut in like this, we're just going to fold it over once and iron it. And then we'll fold it over again. We'll open it up. It's a 5/8 inch seam twice. What that means is you have 5/8 inch of a seam, but you need to double that. So you're just gonna fold it and tuck it under like that. Okay. So we're just gonna roll that under. And if you're just getting started and you wanna do this project, I would consider not doing the pockets, but doing the casing, because that's really fun. The pockets, if you're just using this for cooking, or maybe you make sourdough and you're like, I just want an apron for my sourdough, then this could be that apron, and you don't necessarily need pockets. If you're doing it for gardening, you may want to have like a ton of pockets to put, and bigger, deeper pockets, so that you can put all your fresh veggies in there. If you're making this for like a work, if you're doing it like in a workbench kind of situation, I would consider using denim, because it's really sturdy and strong. And you can even go thrift some old jeans. Maybe you have some old jeans in your closet, and use like the belt loops and things as holders. Would be really fun. Okay, so I'm just trimming off my threads there, and then we're just gonna do that side hem. I've done the 1/4 inch and the 1 inch fold over. So we'll do that. And also I would suggest too, I'm going to give you guys like just a whole bunch of my favorite tips. Once you've made something and your first time making it may be a bit of a struggle, but then once you've done it, that's the hardest part. I think the hardest part is the first time you make something. So once you've made it, consider making it multiple times. So maybe everybody in your family gets an apron for Christmas. Really perfect something, because you'll learn a lot, but you'll also have your confidence. It's a big confidence boost to make a pattern and or to sew something without really even having to look at the instructions. You're like, I got this, I know what I'm doing. And to sew it like that. So I just think like the more you can practice it, the better you'll get at doing it. Because there is certainly a learning curve with sewing. Okay, so we've got our top seam is done and our side seam is done, and we're ready to add the casing. So we're just gonna take our piece, I hope I have the right side, I have both of them here. And this raw edge, you'll line up your top edges. So I've got my top edge here, and I wanna line that up. So we'll put a little pin right there. And then my bottom edge here, we can pin that. And then you'll want, if you have your notches, you'll want to line it up with your notches. If you don't have your notch, line up your middle and then line up at what you half it. So you line it up in the middle and then you go to the middle of that and line it up and then go to the middle and the middle. That way, if you have any excess material, like if it's too big, if one piece is a little bit larger than the other, you can sort of ease that in. And because this is on the curve, it's got that stretch in it. So if your casing piece happened to end up being a little bit smaller or a little bit larger than your actual apron piece, you can kind of stretch it along the way and get it to where it needs to be. So let's grab, let me grab my phone, not throw it on the floor, and we'll give this a shot here. So we're just gonna sew along the, we're just gonna sew along this casing here.
When you were talking about creating the same piece multiple times to gain that confidence, Michelle said, looks like everyone's going to be getting aprons soon.
That is perfect. That's the spirit.
We just lost your camera there.
Oh, here we are.
There we go.
I'm holding it with my chin. So let me see if I can prop it up. Here we go. Okay. So again, you'll have like, I think it's about 3/8 of an inch of a seam on here, and use your foot plate to get that 3/8 inch, and we'll just give it a start and go. If you need to go back at the beginning, you can do the back seam. And I'm just marking my 3/8 of an inch. Now, when you're doing a curve, what you don't want to do is pull it. So like, see how when I pull it, it really stretches? I don't want to do that. So I'm just carefully guiding it with this hand and holding it with the other hand, making sure that it processes through and I've got a nice even seam. But you do not, oops, give me that. You do not want to pull your material. And also every now and then go underneath and make sure everything is out of your way. I can't tell you how many times I've sewn a sleeve onto the front of something just because it wasn't out of the way. Now, when you, after you sew a seam, you want to press that seam open with your iron. So you would press your seam open, and pressing a seam open is where you literally open up your seam and you give it a good press. So you would normally open this up and run your iron and press that open so you have a nice crease on your seam there. And then when you fold it over, then it gives you a nice strong fold there. I'm going to skip that step for us tonight, and I'm just going to wing and a prayer it. So I'll line up my top. So this is going to stay open. That's where your casing, your string is going to go through there to hold your apron. Okay, so we just have to have our casing, and I'm just going to pin this down. So you go. And sorry if this is too, I hope this isn't too close. You guys are really getting a good view. Okay, so you're just going to work that down and pin it. And you just want to make sure it's going to lay smooth. Again, if it's on that curve, so you do have a little bit of give. You don't want to pull on anything, but you don't need to. But if you needed to, you certainly could pull it a little bit just to get it to all go in there. Okay, then we're going to just go back to our machine and stitch on our curve. Now I'm going to do it on this side so you guys can see how it's coming together. Normally I would not. Normally I would turn it over and do it on the other side and use this edge as my seam, as my guide. Oops, I came undone. Get back in there. Okay. I just think there's Reader's Digest years and years and years ago had a great sewing book. You can probably find it at your public library. It was hands down my best sewing book when I started. The book that gave me the most information when I was getting started. So that was a great book. If you can find that book, it's really helpful and has lots of information. So see how I'm just holding everything down nice and flat. I'm moving it along. This same technique that we're doing here to create the casing is what you would do if you were putting a collar on a shirt. This would be like an interfacing to a collar on a shirt. So when you think like, oh, I can't do a shirt, I'm just a beginner. You've already done the hardest part, which is to do the interface. And I would say you really do want to press it and make sure like you have a nice press seam right there. You don't want to do it half like I did here.
What's the name of the Reader's Digest book again, Kelsey?
I think it's called like the Reader's Digest Guide to Sewing. It's a rectangle shaped book. It's longer than it is taller. And it has like a bunch of sewing notions in blocks on the front of it. I think it's like a white book. After I finished college, I unfortunately purged mine in a move, and I regret it to this day that I got rid of that book because it really, if I ever had a question on sewing, that was my go-to. It was great. And it's by Reader's Digest. And it was just this long book. I'm gonna keep looking for it. Maybe if I went on eBay, I'd find it. Okay, so now when I press this will press nice and flat for me. And I'll get my other apron here so you can see how that really turns out on the side there. So I've got that press, see how it looks when it's pressed. When you press in that seam, it's nice and sharp.
It's called the Reader's Digest Complete Guide to Sewing. It runs about $10 to $15, and you can find it anywhere online.
There you go. Is it still like, do they still make it?
There are a lot of copies on eBay, Etsy.
Okay. It really is. I mean, it was a great book. Okay. Sorry, I'm losing my stand here. Okie doke. Well, here we go. All right. I just don't want to have that fall on my head. Okay. So that's how you do the casing, and then you'll have your you'll make your strip that goes through your casing. You just feed it right through your casing and it comes out the top, and this is what goes around your neck, and this is what ties around the side. And so you'll have like your nice big pockets and your casing, and there you go. And then as you get to doing more and more, think about other ways that you can practice on your apron. So if you wanted to add a ruffle to your apron, you could add a ruffle. If you wanted to try some embroidery, you could do an embroidered design, or maybe a heat transfer vinyl design or something like that. there just are so many different ways that you can work with an apron. It really makes it fun. And this gives me, what was that tiger show? Vibes, all the tigers on this one. But so lots of great ideas. Thank you guys so much for joining. Rich, I think I see one more question.
Yep. Sally's wondering, if you cut a certain size out of the pattern, are you still able to use a different size that you may have already cut off already?
So that's a great question. So if I were to have cut this pattern into a small, let's say I did extra large, so that gave me the biggest size. I could go down to large, medium, or small. Once I cut it to small, then it's cut, you cut that off. So sometimes if you're going to use it multiple sizes, you might want to trace the pattern piece. A piece like this doesn't really make that big a difference because you could just fold that back and then cut your piece that way. That curved piece, let me see if I can find that piece. I know I threw it somewhere, but this little piece here, when you cut, here it is. When you cut this piece, you lose the curve. So our extra large curve here cut out the large, the medium, and the small because it's graded. It's a graded patterns. When you see all these different lines and sizes, it's a graded pattern. So if I were to if I were to want to cut this out of small, I couldn't because, once I cut it on the small, then I don't have the extra large, and I cut the extra large, so it cut off the small part that was right here. So once you cut your pattern piece, it is that size, especially if it has if it's graded with multiple pieces like this, not where you could just fold it back like this. But you can always trace this and get your design from there. You know what I'm saying? So then you could have that piece to use multiple times. And you could use like wrapping paper to trace it. You don't have to use tracing paper or anything like that. You could just put it on wrapping paper and trace it, that's a good question. And oftentimes, as you understand how garments go together, you'll understand like, oh, I could just take this curve, come down 2 inches on this, and then create that curve, and that could be my casing. So you'll kind of learn how to make your own patterns the more and more you sew, and the more you look at garments and think, how is that garment put together, and start to deconstruct the garments. All right, well, thank you guys so much, and I really appreciate you joining me in my ad hoc studio here. Hopefully I will be back in my regular studio soon.